Welcome to this Killick Explains video, and welcome to another Ask the Audience poll. This time the question I set was, how do you plan to build most of your lifetime wealth? And I offered 4 possible answers, so I'll run through the results of the poll first and then add some comments around the 4 approaches second. So to those results, and the choices I gave were salary or earnings from self-employment. And that accounted, not surprisingly, for 61.2%, or the lion's share of the votes I received. Why, unsurprisingly? Well, many people throughout a working career will move between being employed and or setting up their own business. So employment and self-employment, portable careers are both options. But the reason I think a lot of people see that as the main source of their lifetime wealth is that most of us are going to have to work longer and possibly harder than perhaps parents did. That's because final salary pensions are on the way out, and state benefits are either getting slightly less generous or being deferred. And besides, when I look at my friends, quite a few of the ones who thought they'd retire early, or even may have actually achieved it, are now wondering what it was exactly they wanted to do with all those years ahead of them as life expectancies rise. So out of a mixture of necessity and or desire, quite a few people are opting to work on longer than perhaps previous generations, and of course the hope has to remain that employers will allow them to do just that. Now the second placed answer was property, and for those people thinking it's surprising that less than 7% of people voted for that one, let's just think about what that means. Your principal private residence, your main home, is not really a piggy bank in the way some people might think it is. It's a good ambition to aim to own a home. After all, it gives you a degree of flexibility, stability and security that renting perhaps doesn't. But ultimately you've got to live somewhere, so you're not going to sell it and put the money into a bank account, one assumes. And anyone thinking, well, I'll downsize later and unlock money that way, needs to be careful for 3 reasons. Firstly, it means you've got to make a difficult choice later in life about relocating and picking a smaller property, and not everyone wants to do that when they get there. Secondly, the amount of money unlocked, a Turner study years ago revealed, isn't as much as people think, because there is pressure on the kind of middle of the market type of property that an awful lot of people want to downsize into. And thirdly, maybe it's unrealistic to think that your lifestyle will actually downgrade later in life once, if you choose to go down that route, you've got children and grandchildren to think about. The other option, of course, is buy-to-let property, but for reasons I've covered in other videos, that's not for everyone. It can be expensive to maintain, it can be a headache in terms of void periods, tenants and so on, and also it's an expensive asset and it's not easily fungible. You can't break it down into chunks like you can with, say, a share portfolio. Now moving on to shares, that was 23.3% of respondents, and that's people thinking not unreasonably that in addition to earnings or self-employment income, they would look to save and invest over the long term, take advantage of the long-term power of compounding, do things tax efficiently through ISAs and SIPPs, for example, and build some wealth that way. And certainly for a lot of people, shares are an easier asset class to think about managing or have someone else manage for them than perhaps, say, property. And then we come to my final category, which was other. Now, an inheritance is a possibility for some people, but studies show that a lot of people are not going to rely heavily on an inheritance from grandparents or parents, and that's probably entirely reasonable, and that's for many reasons. Those folk higher up the family chain may need the money for care costs, which are rising all the time. They may want to use it for themselves to, for example, travel and enjoy life. And also, of course, planning for money to cascade down generations is fraught with some issues. It can be done, and some families want to do exactly that, but in a lot of cases there may not be a huge pot left over for future generations. So relying on an inheritance is probably a mistake. Treating it as something of a bonus might be a better approach. Then, as a friend of mine quipped, if you're not going to earn money and you're not going to inherit it, what are the other options? Well, you could marry it, or try and win it, or possibly steal it. But those last three are all fraught with potential difficulty. Now, to hear more about what is a big topic, building lifetime wealth, and a very important one, please do go to our fairly comprehensive video library, killick.com/learn. And if you'd like copies of any of my guides on everything from how to invest in equities through to planning for later life, in financial terms at least, then please do ping me an email at editor@killick.com.